Let's call this Thursday, September 6, 2018 meeting of the Finance Committee to order. Tonight we'll welcome the published and posted agenda. We're recorded by Chelmsford Media for future viewing. If anyone else in the audience is recording, please let us know now. There is none. First on our agenda tonight is welcoming our new member, Vicky Parks. As you all know, we lost a valued member last year, Naomi Gonsalvo, and luckily, before our new session started, we had someone step up to the plate. Actually, a few people step up to the plate, and Vicky Parks would like to introduce yourself to the audience and to the board.
Hi, I'm Vicky Parks, and I'm glad to be here. I've been a local citizen in Chelmsford for 14 years. I have 2 children that attend Parker, and I'm looking forward to getting involved. I'm a program manager, and I work out at the MITRE complex, and I'm just happy to be here. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. All right, on to the next item on the agenda, the approval of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes in front of us tonight. The first being from April 30th. Has everyone had a chance to review them? I believe that we reviewed them on the March 22nd is the first one. We reviewed them on April 30th, but we postponed the vote on them. So any further comments, questions? Do I have a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes of March 22nd. As presented.
Second. All right, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, next up, April 30th minutes. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the April 30 minutes as presented.
Okay.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Just on page 2, I noticed it said in the second line, Pam, Board of Selection. I think it's supposed to be Board of Selection.
Yep.
All right. Other than that, I have no other comments. Yep. All right. All in favor? Aye.
I would abstain from that vote, and I will not the meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay. Next on the agenda is a report on discussion of FY18 close for town of Chelmsford. Darlene, thank you for coming in today, especially on your birthday.
You wish I'll say.
Thought it was a slide, huh?
Thank you. I did just put a PowerPoint presentation together. I know I had sent you folks out earlier some information so you could look that over, but we'll put this PowerPoint presentation together. So we ended fiscal year 18 in a favorable position. I think we're seeing a little bit of a trend that we have peaked probably with our revenues. You'll see going through that from prior year revenues to this year, we're pretty much just about the same. We're 99.7% of our collected rate of what we budgeted for. But there's some categories in there I think we should really talk about, and that's motor vehicle excise collection. We did exceed the $5 million budget that we had by about $552,000. So it's 3% higher than the prior year. I think we're still seeing just a little bit of increasing due to people are really, I think, leasing vehicles more than buying them. I think that's the trend that we're seeing, because we were wondering why every year we're just seeing it, but I think it's just a continuation of people leasing vehicles. I really do think, though, we're kind of, at this point, going to see just maybe a small little percentage from year to year, but nothing. This is pretty much where we're going to be topped off at. Permits fees were holding pretty steady. The budget was increased from the prior year by $380,000. Because of the prior year we had such a large collection, we had 1.1 million. I increased that budget line item when we did the recap to kind of give it actuals. So by doing that, we came in pretty close. The budget was 1.13 million, and the actuals came in at 1.127. So we were almost right there. Yeah, we were right there. So we're happy to see that, the permitting piece, and I think we'll see even next year with some of the activity that we have in books. Mail collection, we exceeded that also, with $625K budget, we exceeded it by $35K. But this is a 12% increase over the prior year, so that's good news from there, we're seeing that, the meals tax. Next year with the hotel tax, I think we'll see, because this year we had 2 hotels that were offline.
Now back online.
And now they're back online, so hopefully that line item will pick up. And as always, property tax collection remains solid at the 99% collection rate. So good news on that, on the revenue side. I did include just our revenue sheet of local receipts. We did make in total, even though there were some line items that we didn't make the budget, overall we did make the budget. It was $10,275,000 and it came in at $10,450,000. So we exceeded the budget there. Just on the tax line, we always have that small percentage. That's I'm sorry for people who won't be able to see that, but we collect like the 99. So there's that 0.1%. That's the percent that goes into tax title or tax is collected at a later date. We do always collect 100% of it. It just goes into a tax lien and then later collected. The state reimbursement, we received a little bit more on the state reimbursement, and I did note to you on that, we did receive $71,000 from the homeless transportation from actually fiscal 17 that we did not receive. So that kind of brought that over. So there was an additional $71,000 that came in that we didn't receive in the prior year. On the expense side, everybody, like I always praise the department heads do a very good job in managing their budgets. The appropriated budget was $129,564,666. We ended the year at the $127,750. So, and we had encumbrances of $209. So we did have some unexpended funding, and in total it was about $820,000. And that's pretty much will go when I talk about free cash. That's pretty much where the large amount of the free cash was. There were 2 line items I think that people probably would look at why was there a large amount. One of them was public safety. Basically, that was fire. If you remember at last town meeting, we had to appropriate money for a bargaining agreement. What the chief and I had to do is sit down though and figure out what we probably needed to get us through the fiscal year. So we did pad that budget a little bit. I hate that word pad, but we had to put in, we weren't sure what his overtime was going to be, this and that. So this was the amount he just didn't need at the end of the fiscal year, which closes down to free cash. So that's basically, it was all in personnel services on that. So that's why that line item shows that we were like the $260,000 returning. The other piece that we returned, which was on the expenditure side, was under Public Works of $134,000, almost $135,000. That was in the decrease for solid waste tonnage. I think we're not picking up at the apartments and things like that, so that by not having those pickups, our tonnage was down, so that saved money, cost.
This was passed a town meeting, so they had to go.
Anything above 4,
Yeah, we have to get their own permit.
Yeah. So we saved some money in that line item, so that returned back to the general fund. Other than that, everybody else was pretty much just in line where they normally be on their budgeting side. And again, I apologize, these numbers are just really hard to read. So the DOR did certify late on Friday, actually. They certified our free cash. We got the letter on Monday morning, or Tuesday morning. So we ended in the black, which was good. They certified our free cash just under $1 million, $996,403. Like I said, the pieces of the pie, the how to make this up, I did put the calculation of how, I do my calculation is you take your prior year anticipated fund balance and you have to back out real estate and all of this thing. There's an equation to it. But it basically, the pieces that make up the free cash are the returns of the expenditure. So the departmental, we had the $49,700 left in the reserve fund, your budget. And then the surpluses that we had in the local receipts, and then the state, that $71,000 state reimbursement. So that basically is where the pieces of the pie, how we come up with free cash, are in that ballpark. That's how the Department of Revenue looks at my budget. So those are the sources that make up that number. The next pieces I want to talk about are all of the enterprise accounts that we have. I think it's a good thing for you folks to see how DOR then certifies their retained earnings, as we say, instead of free cash, it's a retained earnings. The sewer enterprise had an additional retained earnings this year of $437,000. So that brings their total return earnings of it at $1.9 million. Again, I always say this is a little large number, but I know, speaking with the DPW director and the sewer director, that they're going to be using some of their retained earnings. The sewer system now is getting older, even though some parts of the town is new, but we have old parts. They're going to have to start almost redoing sewer pump stations, things like that are going to have to start being repaired, and they're going to have to start using some of this money in that.
Is there a schedule?
I would have to refer that back to Gary.
Actually, we'll be coming to the following town meeting, not this one, for $800,000 for force main on Progress Ave. That has to be replaced. And that's 30-year-old.
If I mean on the overall system, is there looking forward, a
Yes.
schedule?
Oh, yes, yeah,
What you're gonna
we
spend.
camera certain parts of the town as we go, and we start to log in where we stand with that. And yes, there are. And that's the first one, the estimate has us somewhere between 700,000 and 800,000.
Thank you.
So what I did do is I did show you the pieces, the sewer enterprise revenue budget, their actuals. So their budget for the revenue side was 4.683. It came in under than what they actually budgeted. And again, it's similar to the property taxes. Not everybody pays their sewer bill. So then they go into the tax, they're linked to the tax. So they always collect it. It always gets collected, so I don't always make the number that we're budgeted on. And on the expenditure side, there's a line in there. We actually were way under. $4.6 million was budgeted for the but the actual was 3.9. The line item that I was way under is the user for the bill that we get from Lowell. And I want to explain a little bit of that. There's a calculation that Lowell does. What last year they had billed us $1.6 million. This year and that's what we basically built in the budget, or we added another $100,000 because we could have to go from prior year. In 18, they only billed us 1.3, and then looking at that, it basically is the eligible cost that Lowell, the rate that Lowell has, and that they have in that fiscal year. Then we give them the flow number, and they just take that rate times the flow number. So the rate that was in 17 actually went down. The annual allocable cost for Lowell was actually lower. So it was 1.08 in fiscal 17, and it's 0.09 in 18. So when they do that calculation out, it actually brought the number down.
So you said it changed, so there's a change in.
It's right. Yep. So that, again, that number actually just closed down back, that's, so when I was saying they had an addition of $437,000 that went to their returned earnings, 361,000 of that was that piece of it. The other enterprise fund we have is the golf course. It's a $30,000 budget. We didn't actually we didn't expend anything on this, on the enterprise at all, so $30,000 was sitting there. We did bring in revenue of $43,000. So that the revenue that was brought in, the $43,000, is added to their retained earnings, because there was no expenditure to hit up against that. So now their total retained earnings is $119,000. And the prior year was 75, so you add the 43 to that, so that's now your new retained earnings amount. And again, I just gave you their budget versus actuals to show you that we've got where the fees come in from. And the last enterprise that we have for this year is the PEG access, the cable. They had actually what we call a negative return, or negative returns, retained earnings. So their prior year was 159, they ended the year with 159,582. They're now at 106,000. What that was is, if everybody remembers at fall town meeting, the vote was to take $70,000 from their retained earnings. 30,000 was for new telecommunications equipment, and the 40,000 was for them to do some work over at the DPW building where they were going to store their charge. Yeah. So basically what happens there is that the 70,000 comes out of the retained earnings on top, and then how they ended the year, because we added the 70,000, their expenditures were actually more than what they took in. Which is, it's nothing to be alarmed about. We knew that was probably going to happen. That's just not, it's just a, so it's just basically just reducing down. And like, again, they didn't even though they used $70,000, they really only got hit by the 53 because there wasn't some revenue in there that kind of helped them. So they didn't even really get hit by use the whole 70,000 out of their retained earnings. It really was a net of 16,900 is what the net was, between the 70,000 and the 53. And that's really the end of my presentation. I didn't go into all of the revolving funds. If anybody has questions of any balances in revolving funds, I know the school's going to be doing their presentation, so I didn't go into any of their information. Just for anybody who's just to let you know, let people know that stabilization balance for fiscal 18 was 9.7 was the total of that balance at the end of the fiscal year. And in our, I don't know when people want to know, the OPEB trust fund had ended with 8.8. So in the earning investments in that alone, just for this fiscal year, was $723,000. So we're doing well in investments, on that OPEB trust fund. Like I said, if anybody has any questions, all the revolving funds, they all look good. I don't have any issues with any of those funds. We're all doing fine. So we ended the year.
Any other questions? Charlie, thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome.
Thanks.
Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
Oh.
All right, next on our agenda tonight, we have a report on a discussion of FY18 flows for Chelmsford Public Schools. With us tonight, we have Jay Lang and Glenn.
Take this one.
Happy birthday.
Joanna has some packets, it's just the same copy of the email that I forwarded to the chairman, but we do have some extra copies in case anyone would like them. And we,
Anybody else need one?
and again, as with last year, just kind of reached out to see if I would like to just kind of review how we ended fiscal 18. Just provided a couple of bullet points to kind of talk through, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. We finished fiscal 18 in a strong position. We had a really good year, I think both academically as well as financially in the district. Joanne and the staff have worked very hard to work on our budgeting process as we presented last spring, but I think we're in really good shape. A couple of highlights for you. We had been talking over the last couple of years about trying to build up some reserves for special education, and we've been looking at about trying to come up with 1.5 million as kind of our set aside. If you recall, I just kind of made a note. 3 years ago, we actually had to go before town meeting because we were $500,000 short.
Yes.
We didn't have any reserve, and we wanted to try to build a little bit of a reserve just in case some special education kids moved in or out during the course of the school year. So that was our goal, and we actually were able to not only achieve that, but actually surpass that. By and large, to two main pieces. Our circuit breaker reimbursement from the state ended up coming in at a higher percentage than we had originally budgeted. So we got an extra couple $100,000 that way. Additionally, reimbursement or credit from Valley Collaborative, our collaborative which we send special ed kids to, actually came in higher than we want. So we had about a $500,000 swing that way. So we actually, that's obviously a very healthy balance. We were targeting 1.5. School committee wise, we're going to come up with a strategy, obviously, to spend funds. We don't want to have too much fund on reserve either. There was one timing issue that I pointed out during the memo that we can speak about, is the school district is allowed to carry over at the end of a fiscal year a full year's allocation of circuit breaker funding. So we received about 2.9 million last year, so that's the maximum amount we can carry over. The fourth quarter circuit breaker payment came technically in July. It didn't hit the books by June 30th, so it's technically reported after, which is fine. I mean, it's not, it's just more of a timing issue. But we're just going to have to watch that because now, we potentially could get 5 if the fourth quarter payment 19 comes in before June 30th. We could have 5, quarter payments coming in the same fiscal year, and we don't want to run close to exceeding that. Say that 2.9. We still don't know what our actual number for 19 is going to be. But we'll watch that closely. We'll work with the school committee, and again, it's more of just a timing issue.
Now, is that based off of when you receive it, or so even if they cut the check in June, like June 30th?
It's a wire transfer, so it's when the wire transfer comes through.
It's a wire transfer, right? And you can't accrue, you can't put it in last year's because.
Do we know why that wire came in late?
We're on a cash basis, so.
Yeah.
No, I mean, to be honest, it has happened previously. It's just really when the state processes their final payments. And that
So
particular fund.
if they screw around and process it on July 3rd versus June 30th.
We might also be.
It's when it hits our bank.
It's when it hits
It's
the bank,
just
so
the
they
timing
might
of
have
when it
processed it on the
hit
29th, but they might have been
Weekends could have
a
been in play,
weekend,
Yeah.
things like that. It's, I mean, we still have the funds. It's more of just a timing issue as far as that is going to affect our fund balance. And we just have to watch. But it's really a good news story, overall. It's just a couple of days timing that we have to work on. Second bullet that I just provided in the cover memo is that our food service fund, again, which is a fund a lot of districts, kind of run either right at zero or, sometimes even in the red. We've started to build a little bit of a cushion in that fund, so they're at about $450,000 a year end.
because they were in the red for a while, correct?
They were in the black when I got here.
Okay.
In previous years, they may have. I honestly didn't follow it that closely, but they've been in the black for a few years. That will allow us to actually do a little bit of investment, even outside of the town capital plan, in our school kitchen facilities. So basic things, even like if we have to replace some tables, serving tables in the kitchens, the tables the kids eat at, some kitchen equipment, it just gives us a little bit of a cushion. You want to try to build up about 3 months of revolving fund balance to be able to just adequately cover your costs. So we're certainly going in that direction, but that's obviously a good, another good point, as opposed to some districts being in the red.
Well, adding that automatic payment online is huge.
Yeah, that is huge.
So much
That's
easier.
much easier.
The accounts, so
The
they don't have to
send
send
money
money
to
in.
school thing are
Yeah.
much easier.
Deposit it.
Right.
what is the, you said you wanna have 3 months,
About 3 months.
so what is 1 month, like the ballpark? Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I wanna say probably 120,000. Maybe 120 depending on labor.
Yeah, if you just check and send us that number, that would be
Yeah,
great.
your commodities.
But we can do that, and that's the number we wanna kind of have on reserve, and then on an annual basis, we're not capped, so we can carry more than that, but on an annual basis, let's say, we're supposed to have the 450, and we build the fund up to 5, well, that would give the school committee about $50,000 to be able to expand back into the kitchens. The expenditure has to go back to the food service program, it can't go back anywhere else, but at least it could help sustain some of the food product in the kitchen.
So you can't, so if 450 is your 3 months worth, you're not gonna spend that on updating anything unless you go over the 450.
Right, it's taken us the 3 years to get to that level, so we want to get to the level that we're comfortable with,
Right.
and then going over that is what we would actually try to invest. So this is the year that we kind of are close to hitting what we wanted, so we actually probably wouldn't do any expenditure until the end of the year. We are doing some new food service program enhancements this year, it might be a little bit more costly than what we had previously, and we want to see how that's all going to play out too.
Yeah. Thank
But
you.
we're in good shape.
Yeah,
It's,
I was just curious.
Yeah, but we'll actually have a little bit of capacity to buy some things. And then lastly, actually within the local operating budget, we had several areas where we're offsetting some funds to not only circuit breaker, which we talked about on special education, but school choice funding. And we have enough surplus within our local budget that we didn't have to take those offsets. So the school choice fund is another fund that can actually just accrue from year to year, and then it's available to the school committee to be able to spend on educational purchases and things like that. And we're actually going to be looking a little bit later this year, we're working with the school committee, probably around the holidays, and making some recommendations around some district-wide technology enhancements. So that will be, it's being worked on now, but that'll be rolled out a little bit later. But we're going to target some of that school choice funding as an annual revenue source to be able to fund some technology, like a one-on-one initiative within the district. More to come on that, probably closer to the holidays too. It'll be exciting. Christmas will be coming, and we'll be laying that out. But, so again, those are just kind of 3 points to show to you. Again, we're in really good financial shape. When Joanna had produced the preliminary report to the school committee in July, and then in August, we came back and did the final report. There were about $3,800 worth of changes, and a lot of that was just liquidating POs that, purchases didn't come through or whatnot. But we had the school committee go back and re-vote the final transfer to circuit breaker anyway. So procedurally, the school committee took all the necessary votes they needed to. We've made all of our final year-end journal entries. The books are closed. Joanna worked closely with Darlene on that, and we're actually starting to produce our end-of-year report for the DOE, which will ultimately be audited later on this winter for fiscal 18. A little bit of a chat. Again, it just kind of walks through some of the action on the circuit breaker funding, because there are so many different revenue sources that are coming into play there. Again, we actually expend everything just out of one account. It's easier to track, and then we have the several offsets. And you have a little bit of a history. The last chart just talks through that school choice revenue. And again, it just shows that we didn't actually have to spend anything in fiscal 18. So that will be the source for that technology thing going forward. The very last page of the report is just the school department revolving funds. So these are just the balances at the end of the year. Again, all of our accounts were in the black. We didn't have any in red, which is obviously what we're shooting for. But again, this shows you as well, like your circuit breaker account and your school choice account are all in really good shape. Finance are in good shape as well. We didn't have any issues on our grants either.
On the revolving fund, what was some of the original audited? Was it
It's the student activity.
the student activity? Did that
Yeah.
get audited?
It did. We have the draft on it. We don't have the final audit yet. So we're hoping to get that for the next school committee meeting.
Okay.
And what we're gonna end up doing is one audit a year. So we have the high school fund, which is the most significant one. And then we have the middle school student activity fund.
Yeah.
And they recommend outside auditing the funds once every 3 years.
Yeah.
But we're actually just gonna rotate. So this year we did the high school fund. Next year we'll do the middle schools. Then the year after we'll do the high school. So we're gonna, every year we'll do one audit, like a
Okay.
Powers and Sullivan external audit.
Yeah.
But this year was the high school.
The high school. Now, what's the process? Where's the bookkeeping done at?
In the
Central-
business office.
In the business office now?
Yeah, we actually removed that from the schools,
Oh, okay.
just to provide a little bit, It's easier bookkeeping wise
Yeah.
for the staff in the business office as opposed to kind of throwing that on the schools with so
Yeah,
much
just-
going on.
Yep, I know.
And it's not really, not that the principals and the staff in the buildings can't do it, but it's one extra thing that's really non-educational.
Yeah.
So we actually just doing that in-house in the business office. The school still, technically it's the principal that has to authorize all of the expenditure funds and receipt of funds, so they do that through request forms. And then ultimately, Joanna at her office process the check request and deposit the trust.
Yeah.
Correct, it's like another layer of review, but that's actually worked out really well.
Okay.
So when we have that final report, I'll give that to the school committee and we'll forward that off.
That'd be great, thank you.
You got a regular audit from last year, correct?
Yes.
Did I send that to
Yes.
you? But no, happy to answer any questions. Like I said, fiscal 18 really finished on a positive note. We're already into school, obviously, for 19. We're excited. Looking forward to another good year. We'll certainly provide you updates quarterly. We give them to the school committee. We'll just forward those off to you. And if you ever want to have us in, we're happy to come. And we'll be gearing up for budget season sooner or later.
Before you know it. Any questions? All right, thank you both.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Okay, so next is review and discussion of warrant for the 2018 fall annual town meeting, including presentation of articles, potential presentation of articles 1 through 4, 8, 15, and 24. We have Paul Cullen and John Susie, and Mike McCall. I forgot. Listen, I'm sorry.
Late edition. Good evening, welcome back. We're anxious to get started, and thank you for coming this evening. We're going to first start off with John Souza. We just received in the last week to 10 days 2 critical long-term liability reports. Middlesex County Retirement Cave released their actuarial table, and on Friday afternoon, John received the OPEB actuarial assessment for the last 2 years. So we thought it was helpful to just take a brief moment to go over that, because that really sort of shapes the parameter of some of the long-term operational concerns of the town, and then we'll dive into the warrant for the fall. So I'll just turn it over to John right now, so walk you through the 2 major liabilities.
Thank you, Paul. Just to start off, just a brief summary. I know we've talked about these are 2 of the town's major long-term liabilities that we have. And just to give you a brief update, as Paul said, we just received our OPEB update from our actuarial consultant actually yesterday, which is a good timing for our, as our auditors will be in soon to begin the FY18 full-scale financial audit that's done annually. And we also, around the end of August, we received an update from Middlesex. So what we're required to do is every 2 years, we're on a 2-year cycle, we have to have a full actuarial update performed for our OPEB liability. But with GASB 74 and 75, the consultant is now required to do mid-year or mid-adjustment. So FY18 is a mid-year, it's basically a mid-cycle adjustment. So the town's most recent retirement liability for Middlesex is estimated $105 million, you see up there. Then our OPEB liability from our most recent valuation is calculated at $67.7 million. Now these do, admittedly this is a large number, you're talking over $173 million for both. And just to give you a sense of how this changed from the prior valuation, the retirement liability increased $9.1 million, and our OPEB liability decreased $11.2 million for a net change or a decrease of $2.1 million. We'll talk a little bit about these in the slides ahead. As you know, we belong to the Middlesex County Retirement System. It's a regional system, and the assessments that we pay annually for the prior fiscal year and this fiscal year 19, were based on the valuation that Middlesex had performed as of January 1st, 2016. They just had a new actuarial valuation performed as of January 1st, 2018. This is important because this is going to determine the town of Chelmsford's assessments for both fiscal year 20 and 21. A couple of key things, as you'll see, a couple of reasons for the value, the liability going up is the assumed rate of return. A decision was made by Middlesex to decrease it to 7.5 from 7.75. We'll talk a little bit about that in the slide ahead. And then also, we all know the stories that in society people are living longer. So one of the things their actuarial consultant did is updated the mortality tables. They do this every year to 2 years to reflect those changes. Currently, Middlesex's assumed rate of return on funds is 7.75. As we know in the financial world in recent years, especially following the big recession in 2008, investment returns are lower than they once were. So something that all regional and municipal retirement systems are overseen by a state agency called PERAC, Public Employee Retirement Administration Commission. And one of the roles there is there are actuaries that meet with the retirement systems, and they actually recommend what the retirement system should use for rate of return, because on the one hand, you don't want to be too aggressive and have an assumed return that's too high that you can't meet. That would be unrealistic. But you also don't want to make it artificially low, because you're going to be required to, the members of the retirement system would have to put a significant amount more financial resources into the system to sustain it. So you want to try to strike a balance. So the actuaries that met with Middlesex and other systems, most systems in the state now are going to adopt 7.5. Just included on this slide, you see, I just put these up for calendar years, past calendar years. There's an investment return in the market. You can see 2015 was on the low side, 2016, 6.8, and then we know the markets have been very strong most recently, was just under 16%. One of the things when you look at these numbers, it's important to note is that Middlesex, their actuary uses a smoothing formula. And so each year they only recognize a certain amount of a return, and they do it over about roughly a 5-year. The reason for that is if you have a devastating year like 2008, you don't want to be spiking the assessments for cities and towns up and down dramatically. So when you have a great year, you recognize the gain over 4 to 5 years. When you have a catastrophic loss, you recognize that. So that's what they mean by a smoothing formula.
John, how is the market defined in these definitions?
That's what they actually earned. Most of Middlesex's investments, I believe it's about 95 to 90%, are actually invested in the Commonwealth's Pension Reserves Investment Trust. They call it the TRIT fund. And that's a whole, they're invested in all types of sectors of the market. So when I say market, it really doesn't mean like S&P 500. It's more, you can learn more about how TRIT operates. There's a website out there. It's called, if you go to www.mapension.com, there's a whole organization. It's called PRIM. I know we're throwing a lot of abbreviations. Yeah, acronyms. PRIM is the Pension Reserves and Investment Management Board, and their job is to invest not only the pension fund for teachers, which is the Mass Teachers Retirement System, but they also manage investments for cities and towns and their regional retirement systems, as well as the pension funds for state employees. So they're very, there's a lot of skilled people there doing this. This is a slide I know many of you have seen before. What this is a 10-year history of our assessment that we pay Middlesex, as well as looking ahead 2 years. And this is a lot of numbers, but when you look at all the numbers in the large box, that's basically just breaking down our assessment. So rather than just giving you one number and saying it's $8 or $9 million, this is just to break it up and show you. And you can see when you kind of peel this back and look at it, the normal cost, which is the amount needed to fund pensions of retirees that are receiving a pension right now, you can see it's right around 1.2 million, 1.3 million. the large number that really strikes you is the payment on the unfunded liability. So all cities and towns were not required to fund, pre-fund their pensions before the 1980s. So what we're doing under state law is we're required to fully fund this by the year 2035. So that's the reason you see this ramping up. And the column that says payment due July 1st is what we actually pay. So when the fiscal year begins on July 1st, we actually save about 1.92% from the amount that's in the column just to the left that says total assessment. If we pay Middlesex the full assessment up front at the beginning of the fiscal year, they discount it by about 1.92%, and that's why that column is a little less. The last column that says the change is just to show you the difference in the assessment from one fiscal year from the previous fiscal year. I think the big takeaway from this slide is now that the valuation's in, we now know we can predict what our assessments will be for the coming fiscal year 2020 and the one that follows. And the thing that the town manager and I will have to keep in mind as we plan out the 2020 budget and the next year's is, you see that our pension assessment cost is going up $543,000 for 20, and then it's expected to go up $639,000 for 21. So the good news is that we're on course to fund this liability. The bad news is that we have limited revenue, and this is a significant cost. So just something we have to keep in mind is this is a fixed cost. We are obligated to pay it, but you can see the significance of it.
That's assuming a market return of 7.5%.
Yeah.
Oh, because we've only got less than 20 years remaining, so it's frightening. I mean, just look at the two columns. The normal cost since 2010 to now has gone up 50%. The unfunded liability column that was $4 million in 10 to now 21 goes up 100%. So that's the frightening. I mean, it's just frightening because we're really paying for people who were before us, the unfunded liability, and not the true normal costs going forward. And like I said, right now those numbers are based on a 7.5%. Obviously, over time, they want us to keep moving that 7.5% number down. And what the rule of thumb is, what they're doing, and I've sat at the boards, and John's on the advisory committee there as well. They're hoping to provide a roughly 6% increase each year in your pension assessment. And that's sort of been their rubric, and so, that's the scary part. Our levy limit only goes up 2.5%. We understand that.
Yeah.
They looking at their challenge in front of them, are really looking as a 6%, a rule of thumb as in terms of a cost going forward, because they like to take that 7.5% down to below 7, quite frankly. And when we're at as John said, most pension systems across the Commonwealth are at 7.5%. There are some, unfortunately, that are still higher than that, meaning they're still based on an 8% or so, and then there are some wealthier communities that are below 7%. But the whole goal is, including the state, is to bring that number down to a realistic rate of return, because the market this year to date is not 7%, and we're only got 4 months left. And so, anyways, we really wanted to do this because you get the questions, we get the questions. Why does the town spend more money every year? Why do our taxes go up every year? Well, again, we come out of the box just doing nothing. We're already $543,000 in the hole next year. That comes, exactly. So anyway, exactly. So and honestly, the other thing, and Darlene's here, and it's good. The other change you're going to see, Darlene said tonight, and she was accurate. We finished the year on a statutory basis in the black. Right? However, this year the new GASB requirements roll into the fact the OPEB liability so our balance sheet is going to be negative this year. So the true cost of the town operating, when you fill in the full costs, your pension liability, your OPEB liability, we like other communities, most other communities in the Commonwealth, we will actually run in the red, true cost. That was why over the last decade, the national accounting standards in the state have tried to bring in your true costs, including the OPEB liabilities, doing it every 2 years, the pension assessment every 2 years, to try to demonstrate to the residents in the community and across the Commonwealth the true cost of government operations. So truthfully, we really ran in the red this year. If you look at our true cost of operations, when you figure the liabilities that we incurred. So that's why we want to take some time here, because, it's the realistic future of the community. Like you said, right now the law is 2035, 2037 for the pension liability. There is no deadline for the OPEB liability, but as you can see, the costs are real. And in fact, you go to the earlier slide, the town's liabilities, the pension and retiree health insurance, which is the OPEB liability. The pension and the retiree health insurance obligations of the town are greater than the town's budget considerably. I mean, we're really running a $140 million operation. We got a $173 million liability. And so we take time this evening to point that out at the beginning of your cycle, just to put it into context. The other thing that in Darlene's report that I'll note, and she said it, but it kind of, I want to make sure it didn't get missed. Our local receipts this year, for the first time since the recession, I'd say, were actually less than the prior year. They exceeded our budget by a slight amount of a couple $100,000, but the actual amount that we took in local receipts for motor vehicle, meals tax, investments, and so forth, was actually less in 2018 fiscal year than it was in the 17 fiscal year. And so that's where we're trying to point out, is the concern going forward, because the 2.5 levy will be there, but you've got some pressures coming in. What will the markets and the economy do going forward, and also the impacts of inflation erode at us as well, which is the other thing. So you will see that we're being realistic, and we anticipate sitting with you and the school committee and the selectmen over the next few months, some in open session, some in closed session, because the other thing that's happening is all of our collective bargaining agreements expire at the end of this fiscal year. So we have to meet jointly to, again, look at a long-term plan of how are we going to fund our obligations and obviously pay our labor costs, which is what we operate. We're a service organization in the upcoming years. So I hope you found this overview to be helpful. In fact, the timing just worked out well, where John was literally pulling these slides together today because he noted that the report just came in yesterday. So.
So if I'm doing the math right,
Yeah.
we have a $140 million budget,
Yeah.
2.5 increase is $3.5 million.
Yeah.
So we have to double what we're putting away, just for historic, not for current, but historical to do a catch-up, right? Because we have to, like we're saying, we got 7.5 on the unfunded portion. So we have to double what our allowable increase is. And in essence, you have to kind of cut your other expenses in order to be able to do this.
Either increase revenue or cut expenses, yeah, that's one of
Right, like, when you look at it, what's allowed,
Right.
right? We have to put it, almost 8% away
Right.
to, to catch up, right? Like,
and
it's
And
not.
we've been talking about this a couple of years now.
We've done this, and I think
Yeah,
the selectmen have seen it, which is why they've been so aggressive on the economic development component, because we really, have this real challenge as a community facing the idea of maintaining the quality of life and quality of government services in the community ahead are going to, and you've seen us go through some painstaking activities in recent months, trying to address some very sticky issues with that in mind.
Couple of things, just moving on to OPEB briefly. News is a little bit better there. The new valuation that is really calculated as of June 30th, it's about 11 million lower than the previous valuation. One of the reasons for that is the discount rate. When we calculate, when we do when the actuary does the present value, future value, all of that, the discount rate was increased from 6.5 to 7. And that's based on our investment asset allocation. It isn't something where, I as the finance director, or we can influence the actuary to increase the rate. He basically goes by our investment mix, which is in the credit fund that I discussed earlier. We're starting, and one of the key points of this is we're starting to see the benefits of the town making regular annual contributions. So on June 30th, this 18, Darlene mentioned this in her presentation, we closed the fiscal year with a balance of $8.84 million in the OPEB liability trust fund. In fiscal year 18, as you all know, the investment markets have really been doing very well in the recent year and in the period before that. Just to point out, for fiscal year 18, the OPEB fund earned $720,000. The prior fiscal year, also a very strong year, we earned $737,000, just over that. So I point this out because fiscal year 18 was the 7th year in a row that the town contributed $1 million to the OPEB trust fund. Imagine where we'd be if we hadn't started that process way back. And you can see, you know, the old investment saying that it takes money to make money. If we didn't have a significant principal that we're building, we wouldn't be able to generate these types of returns to try to help offset inflation over time. So, you know, we recognize we have work to do in the years ahead. We take 8.84 million divided by our liability. The funding ratio is 13%, but it's a start. And this is something we'll be working on at least for the next, I would say, 2 decades. But at least we're going in the right direction on this. Anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Without opening actuarial Pandora's box, what's the difference in these liabilities that one, the rate is 7.5 and one is 7?
Sensitivity analysis.
It's just basically what we've started funding OPEB, and the retirement system has a lot more variables to it. So the actuary actually looks at the mix and looks at how much we have set aside or liabilities to decide and makes a recommendation as to what the discount rate should be.
But it is significant, because when we sat at that last board meeting at Middlesex, several months ago before the summer, when they were discussing the change in the premium rate, you know, the rate of return from 7.5 to 7 and so forth, they did have some sensitivity analysis, and it is striking.
Yeah,
it's in the tens of millions,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
which way you go. And that's, like I said, that's the big uncertainty, because as John said, if you get it wrong, it can go one way or the other. If you undershoot it, then, meaning you're assessing the community greater than you should be putting into the fund, and if you overshoot it, then you're not gonna get to the break-even point of 2035. So that's the balance, and so, you know, they do look historically, and that's why they're saying you've got to pull this thing back. Ultimately, they want you to get below 7%. But it's big money, and that's why I said earlier about the rule of thumb of runs 6% or so. They're thinking that's, you know, they really don't think you can ask more than that from the communities, given that the 2.5 constraints. So you're sort of bearing that burden, and that's sort of why. Believe me, they would like to go tomorrow. Everybody in the room would like to go tomorrow to why can't we just go to 7%? Because that number would be choking you even more. You'd be putting in an extra $1 million instead of $600,000 into the fund. And towns and school districts and water districts and everybody, the housing authorities that are in this just can't do it. So they, you know, like you said, it's a gradual, and obviously it's a little easier to do when you're coming off of 2 years of a good market, where you can kind of smooth into it. But like I said,
It's scary to give it that
it's
much.
scary. Yeah, exactly. All right, so now we're going to switch over to the fall warrant. I have a handout, and John's going to put it on the screen. And also, I've got some department heads here in the audience. So what I'm going to ask your indulgence is we'll go out of order, because there's people here who have one article that's really quick, and they really need to suffer through the prolonged discussions of our work tonight. So while we're doing this, if David Boyle wants to come up from cemetery, we'll get David, really fast. So David's article, just to get started, David's the cemetery, his is Article 15, so we'll go to 15, and this one's a familiar article as well, so that way it's even better.
Welcome back.
How are you doing?
Good, how are you? Good.
I'll just jump to his article. Last one.
Oh, the last one first?
Almost last one. Almost last one.
24 is still there.
There it is.
Okay, David's seeking $75,000 from the sale of graves and lots to the Cemetery Improvement and Development Fund. And I'll just ask David to sort of just walk you through where he's at with the project, because you've seen him here at every town meeting. Go ahead, Dave.
So basically where we're at now is I had 50,000 approved for transfer in the spring. And since then, there's about $100,000 in that sale lots account. So I'd like to transfer 75 and continue that project. At this point, we're actually, engineering is helping us out as far as getting grades, where the road's gonna go, the drainage, stuff like that. We are, I'm in the process right now of updating the bids for fencing, for surrounding the fencing at Pine Ridge, the new section. It's about 7 acres of land there. Once the fence is up, I'm actually in the process right now, you might have seen around town they're repaving, and as much reclaimed material as I can get, I'm taking, it's free. So that's a good base for my roads, for the roads that I'm doing. So basically that's where we're at. Once the roads are in, get the grade up, sewer, not so much sewer, just drainage and so forth, water, and then we'd start with. I'm hoping next spring to be able to screen the loom that I have on site and get the section going. Because it will take approximately from the time we put the loom down and we hydro seed. I have to let it sit for a year before I can mark it, before it can be sold just a second. So it's about 2 years out.
Any questions?
Was the 100,000 balance you mentioned, that was in the sell raised lots
Yes.
currently?
Yeah, that's about when I checked with Don a few weeks ago, that's about what it was.
That means that one of the controls. Okay. Pretty self-explanatory. Pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, we'll probably take it up under consent agenda.
Yeah.
As we did last time.
It's the funds are there, and that's what they're there for. All right, any further questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we'll go to our previous article, Article 14, the cable access utility trails. Pete Padula, come on up, and he's got a modest request, only $10,000.
Modest.
Modest, right. And thank you for out of the order. Yeah, appreciate it. Only another consent agenda item.
This wasn't just an item that we weren't really expecting. We have a landscape trailer that we pull with our SUV that takes the equipment to the chutes that we have. And with some of the new purchases we're making, the new cameras, it's not gonna be rated for enough weight. So we need to buy a new trailer, which we've done some initial look at, probably about 8,000. So I'm asking for 10 just to cover it. Out of the one, I think she said it was 106 that was certified for our free cash, our undesignated fund balance. And this is just, again, we may have the money in our budget, but, we are facing declining revenues, so hopefully we come up in the black at the end, we just put it back in, so, but just to, 3 quarters from now, I'm not sure what's going to happen.
Any questions? It's a modest request. Yeah, I agree, probably consent agenda item, although, who knows?
Somebody go take it
Something
out.
always take out of it, that's happened in the past. But it's coming from your reserve fund, there's plenty of space there right now, although we have noted the decline in the revenue, and it's a concern.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All righty, so now we'll go back, and we do have Gary and Steve here, and Gary Ryan. But we'll sort of just go back now to rather than jumping perpetually, we'll go back to this, looking back to the beginning. Make a little.
Sorry, guys.
Because they have multiple articles, but I promise you, you're actually gonna have more time with them than you will with us. We'll be quick. All right, we'll get real quick. Article 1 is no financial, it's the report of town offices. The notable one in the fall is John will provide the 5-year financial forecast, so we'll have that. So again, that'll be the end of Article 1. Article 2 is, oops, I must have just did that. There we go. Article 2 is collective bargaining agreements. This is, you may recall, when we left Springtown meeting, we had outstanding the 2 police union, the patrol officers and the superior officers. We anticipate that we will have resolution of those by fall town meeting, and in fact, we're expecting a formal award tomorrow on the patrol officers, and we're meeting with the superior officers on Wednesday, and I'm hopeful that I can come here next Thursday night and present you with detailed data. Why I'm comfortable is given that right now the only group remaining is the superior officers, and given that we have arbitration rulings on the firefighters and the patrol officers, we kind of have some comfort level where the superiors might wind up because you're in that same proximity of scope. So again, we'll have an update for you at next Thursday evening, and the good news is then we will know our standing as a whole as a town, and then obviously we start the cycle again because all these contracts expire the current fiscal year. So again, we had a very productive session with the patrol union this past Wednesday. The arbitrator sent out a draft, and I think the formal release of the final agreement could come as early as tomorrow. When it does come, I'll send it out to you, obviously the selectmen and so forth. We're sort of under a gag rule right now not to discuss publicly the parameters of the draft ruling because he wants to get the feedback from the management labor side. So good news, at least we'll have certainty, and also it's good news, it's just good to have the contracts resolved. So anyway, that's where we are. All right, Article 3 is to change the current fiscal year operating budget that we left at the town meeting. Only have one change, but it's significant. And as you know, we rarely bring budget adjustments at the fall town meeting unless they're material and significant. And this one is significant, not so much in dollars, but in terms of the rationale. We're seeking $33,681 to the line item number 12, Community Services Personnel Services. What this is this is the Board of Health, and it's for an additional health inspector. And this would be the cost basically from December to the end of the fiscal year for a full-time, a second, i.e. a second full-time inspector beyond the one, so it'll be one more than the one we have right now. And what's going on here is a couple things, and I think you'll appreciate why I'm supporting this, and obviously I've got letters of support from the Board of Health and the Health Director. We've had a 10% increase in food-related establishments over the past 2 years, so part of the resurgence of dining and activity in the town, which you've seen in the meals tax, as we noted earlier, they're now out inspecting 215 food-related establishments. Of more note to that, they've had a 40% increase, basically from over 10 a month to over 14 a month in complaints that they're responding to, dealing from nuisances from noise, odor, trash, foodborne illness, dumpster problems, beavers, mold, lead, and so forth.
I think beaver's my favorite one.
Yeah. Well, the current one, and you probably hear about it on that selectmen meeting, has to do with rodents. This is hell. I mean, this is a concern of the community. And the key bullet is the fourth bullet. I am told, and I have evidence to show that it's true, that the Board of Health right now is not able to inspect all food establishments in a timely manner. That leaves me unsettled. And it leaves them unsettled, and we saw what's happening in Hampton Beach on health issues.
Or next door.
Or next door in Lowell. I don't want to be the person talking to any media or residents or boards or officials. This is stuff that keeps me up awake at night. Here's the data. From 17 to 18 in terms of inspections. In 2017, you can see that they did 132 food establishment inspections, and then they did 225 re-inspections. And the issue is that the standards require, it's not uniform. Some place they go to only have one health inspection per year, some have as many as 3, so it's not linear. They also do inspections in the schools because we serve food in the schools. and other food retail establishments. Mobile, you can see the big surge in they have mobile food trucks and so forth. You can see that, you know, the numbers are growing there as well. It's to the point where they're just not able to, as they note at the bottom, the inspector was not able to inspect 74 of the 204 listed in 2017. So it didn't take me long to basically say, we've got to bring this to town meeting now. And I just think it's reflective on a fundamental obligation we have as a community in terms of public health and public safety, and obviously public education. Public health is for, you know, we're out there spraying mosquitoes tonight because of health concerns. And as you can see, their activity level is increasing in terms of nuisances and so forth. And so I believe it's warranted. Sue's not able to be here. She recently had a medical procedure, so she's out of work, so she's not able to be here. Otherwise, she would be here this evening. But I did ask her, and I did get data. I said, well, how do we compare, you know, with other towns? And right now, when we look at our neighboring towns of Billerica and Tewksbury and so forth, they don't have just one inspector. Billerica has 2 full-time inspectors. Tewksbury has 1.5 inspectors. And based on the number of food establishments and such that we have in Chelmsford, because if you noted, Billerica is not noted for having a large number of restaurants. I believe it's warranted in seeking your support and the town meeting support, and obviously the selectmen's support, when they make their recommendations in a couple of weeks, to support this additional appropriation of the 33,681. You know,
So
to actual budget.
that's
That's their remaining cost of the year for salary. What it doesn't have, obviously, is it doesn't have benefits. Right now, that will be absorbed by our benefits budget. It does look like that we'll be able to absorb it in our benefits budget based on the anticipated federal medical health plans that renew on the calendar year. You know, so your Medicare supplement plans and so forth, we will have that capacity to absorb the 30, you know, the 20,000, whatever. We don't know. Yeah, obviously, but if you take an average of 20,000, because you don't know what the employee issue is going to take for a plan. So I'm not asking, you know, for 20,000, you know, for the benefit component, because it really wouldn't be 20, it'd really be 12,000 because you're not covering the full calendar year. So I just said, you know what, you know, I'm not going to be asking for money then turning it back at the end of the year. We do know we need in the budget line the 33,681 for personnel. So that's the request.
Do we charge when we go out and
Oh,
inspections?
Yeah.
So when I talked to Sue last year, she felt that there was maybe room that we could increase our fees. Have we looked at doing that? I mean, obviously it's not gonna offset.
No, but that is part of it. We will do that because they have not been raised in years.
Yeah.
And so we will be doing that. I don't have that authority because they're an elected board,
Yep.
but I think that's sort of the quid pro quo. Yeah, we'll staff you accordingly and appropriately, but you better bring your fees into.
Yeah, no, because I think she did mention that she wanted to look at that and recommend it. Yeah.
Do we ever consider temporaries, you know, hiring somebody part-time, and seeing how effective we are in improving this?
I would if this were a temporary phenomenon, but this is a permanent challenge. So yes, we use temporary employees. You know, we use them seasonally in the cemetery and DPW and so forth. We look at interns, but this is a permanent need going forward that isn't cyclical. It's continual throughout the year.
Well, every time we hire another person, we add to the future liability. Okay, and if we continue to just hire, then that is certainly going to be an issue going forward from my perspective.
Well, yeah, I can understand that, and it's also an issue if we have a foodborne illness issue. If we prefer not completing our inspections, this is the Board of Health concern. Well, we're not voting tonight. We can
No, that's your
we
vote
can
tonight.
certainly discuss this when we don't have time to vote. But I see that's a real concern. 74 were not inspected.
That floored me. I did not know this.
74.
I did not know this until this was brought to my attention, and I said, I can't.
We have 4 cases of Legionnaires next door. Just
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, this is.
Have
I'm
there
sorry,
been
what did
any
you say?
fines? Have we fined anybody for?
They've closed establishments. I mean, I don't want to mention names, but there was an establishment on Drum Hill you may know, that was closed for a period of days because of a unsanitary, it was an
Few
issue with the
times.
sewer line.
And you
And
can't
a
close
few
it
different ones that were
before you
closed
don't.
multiple
Yeah,
times.
exactly,
Yeah,
yeah.
you
So I
can't
mean,
close it before you don't inspect.
so it's
Right.
not like, oh, this doesn't happen in Chelmsford, it does happen in Chelmsford. And, you know, but again, when I look at Westford that has a 1.5 health inspectors, you know, health inspector and an 18-hour food inspector, and, you know, and Borka has 2 full-time health inspectors, you know, I can, you know, I sort of look internally, look externally, look at the workload, and most alarming here, you know, that we're not able to deal with, you know, the workload that we have. So anyway, like I said, you know, it's my job to recommend the budget for the town, and again, you know, I would normally have Sue here with me to speak to it, but like I said, she's just, you know, just had a medical procedure, it's not able to be here. And she will not, we're not anticipating her back to work for several weeks, so not like I can say to you, oh, she'll be here next Thursday or such. So anyway, that's the request under Article 3, and again, I know I'm not asking for your vote this evening, but I wanted to bring this to your attention. All right, Article 4, we're now gonna have Gary and Steve come up, it's the return of stormwater.
Steve, don't look so excited.
The other thing that happened since Springtown meeting was, much to our surprise and amazement, the federal government, which is relaxing regulations left and right, implemented the new stormwater regulations that they had postponed for a year. And so the reality is we've produced a budget which is modest because we're ramping up, and you'll see this, you know, that it's really not reflective of the true annual cost of doing it, but we are reflective of the notion from the past town meetings we experienced, and what we see to get us through this remaining of the fiscal year. So we're seeking $116,360 in personnel services, $392,296 in expenses, for a total of $508,656 for the stormwater enterprise, management enterprise revenues. Here's the list of capital equipment. I'll run through it, then we can take questions for Steve and Gary. We're seeking $985,000 for capital equipment that would be borrowed from the stormwater enterprise fund. You can see it's a light-duty truck, a small SUV, 2 medium-duty trucks, and the office build-out. That gets you the $985,000. Again, that would be borrowed. Obviously, the big nut there is the office build-out. You've got to build it out, even though we're not going to be fully up to speed. You know, we're not going to do a partial build-out. It's got to get done for cost effectiveness.
What are we doing for the build-out?
It's the area, if you've been down at the DPW, there's a portion of the building that was set aside for future expansion, and we now have to go in and do that expansion. Into the, if you go in the door to the right, as opposed to the left, you know.
So what, in this, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I'm
go
going
ahead.
to jump in here.
Yeah.
What is not here that was in here when it was first presented? I know items were removed from our initial ask.
Go ahead.
What,
I know the back truck's not there.
no, what this budget represents is what was amended and approved a year and a half ago in Springtown meeting.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep, the capital items are all the same,
All the same.
not the full.
Full ask,
you know,
yeah.
But what was amended and then approved, this is basically it for capital, and the personnel has been cut just because of the, you know, it's only a 6-month period.
Yeah, so what'll happen with the personnel part, you can see we anticipate having a stormwater engineer and GIS manager for 6 months, and then by the time we get people secure, advertised, secured, and in positions, we're really funding 3 months for the foreman, equipment operator, and driver laborer. And that's why it only comes up to $116,360. What leaves me uncomfortable on this, quite frankly, is we're gonna start the surcharge in January, you know, for the last half of the fiscal year, because remember, we bill sewer semi-annual. So they're gonna see a artificially low, although accurate, stormwater surcharge on their sewer bills, right? And then what's gonna happen is, you know, it's gonna jump in 6 months, and then they're gonna say, well, why is my surcharge jumping? It's because of the phase-in. But I don't know any other way around it. We're not gonna overcharge people just to have sake of a surcharge. But I mean, and so anyway, that's what it is. I mean, where you can see we're being very conservative, we're not, you know, and again, we heard it loud and clear, the experience of the 2017 spring annual town meeting, where we came into looking to, you know, go full board. It was like, oh no, why don't you just work your way into it? So, you know, this is working our way into it. But I don't want people to think that this is not happening. At the end of this month, they have to submit their notice of intent to EPA of their plan.
Now, what does this do?
It's for the drainage system in town, basically.
But what do we say?
Well, we're saving the world. We're saving the environment.
Thanks, Paul.
Protecting water, runoff,
Water.
protection,
Streams.
streams,
Protecting our drinking water.
drinking water.
All right.
So they have to, what they have to do, what they have to go out and do, and they can give you all the details, they're gonna go out and do water samples at stormwater runoff, drainage.
I'm not against.
No, I'm not against it. That's why I explained what it is.
That's why it's quite, yeah.
That's why they do it. They, you know, they have to,
Someone's gonna ask me.
yeah, exactly. And so,
To
we,
explain
so
it.
we'll go to town meeting with the full slides and pictures of all the things like we did back in the spring of
Can I make a request
2017, but I didn't wanna put you through all that again.
But you're not asking for anything more than what you originally presented.
No,
No.
no,
No, thank you.
no, because we figured that was the safe, you know, the sound and safe way.
And
to proceed.
it's not a tax increase, it's simply a charge on the.
Yeah, well,
Well,
somebody's writing it off.
But I'm just saying.
We had 3 minutes argument about that.
The problem is you can't write it off on your taxes either.
But now
Once you get
with the tax-
10,000,
but
once
now
you get
with the
10,000.
tax thing, it's moving.
It's moved.
So it's not a problem.
Yeah.
So I'm all on that.
Yeah. Can I make a request or suggestions?
Yes.
Can we reduce the presentation by about 75% from the last presentation?
Oh, yeah.
We lost people, I think.
Well, that's why this is real truncated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No problem.
I knew you loved that, Steve.
Keep it
Yeah,
down
our
to 2
plan-
pictures.
Our plan is to keep it down to a couple pictures.
Fantastic, yeah.
What is it we're doing and then why?
Fantastic.
And the difference now is it's in effect. It's not, this is what's gonna happen.
No.
It's- By then, by a town-to-town meeting, our plan will already been submitted.
Correct.
And then just put the link in from last time.
Yeah.
Let's watch this
If you
one.
want to revisit it,
No, one was enough.
Right?
So what are the actualized costs for the next year then? If we're looking at, you know, this adjusted 3-month, 6-month period, what are you looking at for full board cost in the next fiscal, not this fiscal year, the next fiscal year?
It goes back to the full.
That full,
Yeah, the budget that was approved a year and a half ago was a shade under 1.1 million.
that's what I thought, okay.
And that was phased in, that was phased.
That was
wasn't
phased,
full
that was
board.
phased.
No, the full board budget was a touch over 2 million.
2 million,
Yeah.
that's right.
Okay.
So we were starting at about halfway up the ladder, so.
Because the federal government haven't changed, they didn't change, you remember there was 2 things that happened. There was litigation filed by Lowell and Franklin and a couple other towns to change it, and then they put the moratorium on. Well, they never resolved the litigation, and they just released the standard. So that's why we're proceeding this way. But you're right, when it comes up to full operational, it will be a $2 million. Right, and that's why, as I'm saying, these people are gonna get an artificially low surcharge on their sewer bills, and then it's gonna kick in.
It was what, $70 per?
Yeah.
I know it's a graduated, based upon how much porous pavement you had for.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
70, yeah. It was,
For residential homes, within the residential home, it was, at this half budget, it was gonna be $20. Maximum was gonna be 40. But then commercial properties, retail, industrial, all that stuff was based off.
Based on square footage.
Impervious.
Impervious.
Yep.
so you're right, it's really only 25% of the full.
Yeah, I think it's a concern.
Which means that their surcharges will go up, 4 times.
Yeah.
From the initial surcharge. So anyway, that's stormwater. Yeah, that's stormwater. All right, Articles 5, 6, and 7 are before the selectmen, and so I don't have them, but I'll have them for you next Thursday because the selectmen are meeting. Article 5 is a study of municipal emergency ambulance and fire station consolidation. I believe the dollar amount's around 85,000, but the selectmen, haven't, fully voted their number.
Didn't we already do this?
You're thinking of the consolidation of the dispatch.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, which we bought capital for and put it in, but we didn't join the regional.
Yeah, that's Monday night as well, but that's not.
Yeah, well, that's.
But that's not this one.
That's
No,
not this,
okay.
yeah, so it's around 85,000. Article 6 is Chelmsford Center for the Arts and Chelmsford Community Center. The selectmen are seeking to add some money to supplement support the operations of. What now is, I'm told tonight, is only the Chelmsford Center for the Arts. There'll be no request for the Chelmsford Community Center. Unfortunately, Susan Gates, who's the director and volunteer, she's not available to attend Monday night selectmen's meeting.
She's coming to our next.
She's coming to your next meeting, so you'll hear her on the 20th, yeah. So that's what that is. And then Article 7, we will have a presentation Monday night. The selectmen are seeking to support the efforts of preservation of conservation lands, the efforts by the Chelmsford Open Space Stewards. So Phil Stanway is scheduled to be at the selectmen meeting on Monday evening to present, the request there. Again, we're talking modest numbers in the big scheme of things, but it is new and it is novel, and so we'll get those here for your next meeting next Thursday. Article 8, and I'm going to turn this one over to Mike, because Mike's part of the Vinyl Square implementation action plan committee. And so I'll turn this one over to Mike. Go ahead, Mike.
So Evan and I attend the regular meetings of the Vinyl Square Strategic Action Plan Committee. And what they're looking for here is two sums. One of $27,500 from free cash to do a survey of Vinyl Square. And secondly, $10,000 to purchase and install portable planters and dwarf trees. What they're looking to do is a full survey of the square to look at the street and the sidewalks, so they can seek funding for the resurfacing and reconfiguration of Vinyl Square. We've had some looking at different ways to improve parking up there. And they also need to demonstrate that there'll be accessibility when they put these planters and trees out there. The actual strategic action plan identified the fact that there are no trees, as you know, if you go through Vinyl Square. And there was a 2012 MinCog traffic and safety study that also indicated that, among other things, aesthetic improvements should be undertaken to include streetscapes, and one of the things they identified was trees. So in conjunction with both of these requests, the end goal is to be able to have these trees in planters that be portable, that can be stored during the winter, but would enhance the aesthetics up there and would go a long way to them reconfiguring the square for parking purposes so that people can utilize the square more easily.
And state on that.
Yes, there'll be, Evan, I believe, is going to be looking at seeking state funding.
Yeah, the goal is that to get on the state major project list, you've got to sort of do the engineering and the survey work ahead of time.
Is that the
We're
same
gonna-
thing that we did for the 129?
Yeah, Riverneck, yes, yes.
That's.
And the one at Concord Road, and, yeah,
Okay.
and, exactly. So that's the goal, and, so that'll take some.
Where would we store these portable planters and dwarf trees?
That's why Gary's here.
In the build-out section, the stormwater.
There was some discussion up at the CCC, I know that was mentioned.
Right now, they store the temporary ones, the smaller planters that are out there. Those aren't.
Those don't have anything in them.
Exactly, yeah.
These are gonna plants.
Would you,
Trees.
do we have to do the removal? Is there room to do real plants? Real plantings?
No, plus
They
there's
don't-
especially if they're gonna be
significant cuts into the sidewalks, and there's the accessibility and maintenance of those that way.
So if you're doing a survey, look at the streetscape and reconfiguring,
Yeah.
why would you buy tree planters before you figure out what you may have to tear up and replace a
Pool
vehicle?
planters well, that's the
Well,
whole
I know,
idea.
but it's like,
But it's probably years before
Yeah,
you'll
we're gonna
get
see
the
this
state to
before,
do that. They want the beautification and efforts now, but you promise because of the state roadway and state right-of-way and sidewalks, the state won't allow the placement until we demonstrate to them with a survey that won't impede the accessibility.
So we have to
so
put
you
them
can't even
there.
put the,
We cannot go today and put the planters in without the survey.
even, okay.
Yeah. Because of the
Survey occurs, then we put the planters out until we get an actual,
Money
you know,
from- yeah.
decade and a half funding maybe. Okay.
Okay. That's Article 8.
Someday.
Article 9 is, the first of what you're gonna see is a annual article in the fall regarding the Commonwealth Transportation Infrastructure Fund. You can see it's a whopping $5,035.80. And here's the story behind it. Back in 2016, so 2 years ago, the state passed a law on these transportation network companies. You know them more as Uber and Lyft and so forth, basically charging a assessment or surcharge of 20 cents per ride to support their operations in the Commonwealth. The state keeps half, 50% of it, or 10 cents per ride, goes back to the community where the ride originates. In Chelmsford's case, there were 50,358 rides in 2017 that originated in Chelmsford. So obviously 10 cents of those is 5,035.80. You can imagine the numbers for Boston and Cambridge and so forth. And the requirement of the law is the funds have to be used to address the impact of transportation network services on municipal roads, bridges, or other transportation infrastructure, or any other public purpose substantially related to the operation of transportation network services in the city of town, including but not limited to a complete streets program and other programs that support alternative means of transportation. Well, obviously, we're not, we don't have the demand and the challenges that Boston and Cambridge and so forth have. So, we're not going to address the impacts of these things in Chelmsford where we only have 50,000 rides and they don't. So ours is on the complete streets and other things. So basically, what does this mean? We can take our $5,000 and do it to install electric vehicle charging stations or improve crosswalks or bike lanes, which is the complete street thing, something that supports it. And why we have to do that is because every year the state gives you up the money, they require you to go to town meeting to appropriate it, and at the end of the calendar year, you got to report to the state how you spent the money.
You have to spend the entire,
Well, no, you have to put how you spend it or how you plan to spend
how
it.
you plan to spend
Can
it.
we buy
Right.
planters this one?
No, you can't buy plans, it's not transportation.
What if they're strategically placed in the street?
You should put rollers on the bottom.
In the road, exactly.
So we're actually,
Another
going-
sign that
so what we're
says-
actually going to use it on is, we're gonna use it down the street over here at Omni Way and Borica Road. I don't know if many of you are aware that there's been a major tendency at Omni Way.
Yes.
Yeah.
The most notable one is the Massachusetts Department of Children and Family Services relocated from Lowell to Omni Way 3 weeks ago. It was the quietest relocation I've ever heard of from a major state agency that serves, a very large population. So what we were able to do is, we were able to convince the LRTA, the bus service, to actually not drop people off on the inbound into Chelmsford Center on the far side of the 4-lane highway. So they're actually gonna take a left at the lights, go up Omni Way, and then come back. So that's a plus, because there's traffic still there, but there isn't a crosswalk
Right.
thing there that, you push the button, you get the countdown, all that other stuff. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use the 5,000, it's gonna get us that, but we're gonna throw it into the pool so that we can do a full crosswalk at the location for permanency, because, you've got life links up there now, you've got DCF, and you still have the other companies that are up there, Comcast and so forth, and the whole idea of the pedestrian mobility in that area. So we'll throw that 5,000 into that pool, but.
In the meantime, everybody should take a Lyft and Uber.
Yeah, so every time you 10 cents every time you ride, it goes to Chelmsford. So,
Crosswalking here.
yeah. So it's, it is amazing, but it's still, that's 1,000 rides a week.
That's impressive. I mean,
That's
that's originating here, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Now, is it only if it's originated or if it ends here?
No, it's only if it's originated.
Originated.
It's 1,000 rides a week from Chelmsford, so it's not,
That's not-
and it's obviously not going down.
That's pretty good, yeah.
So that's the Commonwealth Transportation Infrastructure.
Think about it like
Seniors
in
have
Boston.
to get
Right.
vans to bring their seniors.
We're gonna Uber them? No.
Yeah,
Don't think we're gonna do that, no.
Maybe a little too
Use it
expensive.
on a train. Yeah.
All right.
No?
All right. So that's Article 9. Article 10, I guess probably bring Steve back up. This is easements for Borica Road and the Riverneck Road intersection, the one you were mentioning earlier.
Yes.
As part of this, we have to, it's moving along, and they had a public hearing in this room that
was tremendously enjoyable for Steve and the state officials.
Stormwater was easy.
Stormwater was easy. So right now, we have to, do the takings and right-of-way for that. And Steve can sort of walk you through the,
Oh,
we're really dealing with.
visual aids.
Visual.
So, I mean, if you're familiar with Billricker Road, this is the Golden Cove Turnpike traffic signal. Heading down Billricker Road, Riverneck Road, the cemetery.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the project stops, basically a community tree. So with this, it's pretty far down the road, Mass DOT, as was sort of stated earlier, we fund the design, this is through the TIP program, Transportation Improvement Project with Mass DOT. So the town funds the design and all the permitting, and Mass DOT funds the construction. So again, we're pretty far down the line, we're to the point now where there's the need for some easements. There's, I believe, 12 temporary easements, basically for like, relooming the lawn type of thing. And then there's 11 or 12 permanent easements, the majority of which are for like, the support wire off a telephone pole. Some of them are existing, some aren't. Because there are some poles along the cemetery that are gonna have to move. But this is just, I just brought this so you get familiar with the project. Some of the easements are 75 square feet, small. More than half of the easements are either on town of Chelmsford property, water district property, or the cemetery. So there's a few residential properties up here, Workers Credit Union is one, there's the residential property on the corner of Golden Cove, and then that office building that sits downtown in the hole there, that has a couple of small utility easements on the front. The vote is to authorize the selectmen to use basically any means necessary to obtain them. That can be eminent domain, I can work with the people, they can gift them, or I get an appraisal and
Compensation.
compensation.
And how much on the residential property are we taking from residents?
I think the biggest one, and it's not, we're not taking the property, we're just getting easement. Some of it is just for like the back edge of a sidewalk type of thing. So, here's one that's it's 498 square feet. There's 697, 99, 141, 488 square feet. So it's
And this is just to put the
just kind of along the road, or
right
like just
beside.
be a small corner that we need to,
Yeah.
realign a driveway or something like that.
You anticipate any resistance?
They can't, because you have ultimately you have the power of eminent
Right,
domain.
right.
They can only they can only sue you if they didn't think they were compensated fairly, but it's the minimum.
In the past with projects like this, and we've done a few, we haven't had any issue. I'll work with people over the winter, meet with everybody individually. The temporary ones are usually, there's no value, they might get $1. The permanent ones could be $200 or something like that. Usually I just use the funds out that are appropriated every year with capital cover stuff like this.
It's very improvement.
Any questions?
Part of that, there's a tunnel.
Turtle tunnel? The turtle tunnel.
Yes.
The next two articles are how to appropriate
Oh, yeah.
the remaining free cash that we have remaining from the previous actions, to either reduce the property tax levy or put it into the stabilization fund. I don't have anything for you this evening because, again, we don't have those contract settlements or the two miscellaneous articles from the selectmen. But as Darlene told you earlier this evening, the free cash was less than $1 million, which is small. If you think about it, we're running I think last year was $132 million operation. We finished less than 132nd of that,
Was it 2.1 last year?
Yeah, exactly. And so it's small, but there will be some money. But again, remember, we're gonna have to take some of that to pay retroactive. Those police contracts are gonna be 2 years retroactive, and then the balance of this current fiscal year. So once we get those numbers, we'll put them out to you. The other thing is, you're right, if we're taxing $100 million, $500,000 to that thing is gonna be
insignificant, so, but you know this issue is, always rears its head. And so
It does.
I placed an article for both possibilities, you know, which are not exclusive, it could be a combination thereof.
So it's free cash, not free
Yeah,
cash.
free cash, yeah.
That's,
That's spelled wrong.
well, updated. Transfer fee cash.
Oh, fee, yes.
Okay, there you go, okay. Article 13, we now get into the revenue, once again, the revenue fund. You saw that for the cemetery, you saw it for the egg access. The final one is for the golf course enterprise fund, and this is for the 9th hole green at the Chelmsford Country Club. And again, Mike's been handling this one, so I'm gonna turn it over to Mike in terms of what's being sought here for this article.
So what the golf course would be looking for is $86,500 for improvements to the 9th hole. 9th hole, as you know, our municipal golf course has 9 holes. It's the last hole. It's also the lasting impression when people are leaving. I'll have some slides in a second showing the topography and the actual layout right now. But as Darlene alluded to earlier, there's $119,265 in the golf course enterprise fund. They haven't made any significant improvements in the last couple of years. They've sought out some consultants. They estimate it would be about $86,600. If possible, we talked to Steve Young and DPW. They said they'd be able to do some of the site work. The consultant came back and felt there was approximately $6,000 worth of work that could be saved by utilizing the town. Sterling Golf, I asked Kevin Osgood, who's the manager over there, to give me some projections on return on investment. And he believes that due to a couple of factors, that there should be an increase in 10% of revenues once this is complete. And it's not only the aesthetics on the golf course, improving the actual 9th hole, but there are other factors, including the Tingsboro Golf Course, as you may have read, is closing shop. He has had significant inquiries from other leagues that would like to come over, so he anticipates increased utilization of the golf course. And by improving the 9th green, it will improve not only the play again, but the aesthetics. He pays approximately $33,000 a year in his fee plus the club rental, but he believes that the base fee will increase from approximately $33,000 to $40,000 going forward in fiscal year 2020, and with a total payment of just under $50,000 when you add the club rental fee. The existing topography, if you haven't been out there, if you start to look on the top, I'll just stand up, is the 9th. Here's the clubhouse. Here's the 9th green. This is the first green. And they've also made some minor improvements this year, if you don't know. They did some, for about $6,000, they changed the angle of the first tee box because we, as Jim may know, his family's right over here.
We're further away, so it's not as bad.
But some of the shots coming off the first tee are hooking back in and landing here. There's been improvements to the netting along the side, but there's still some balls to get over. So the thought was to move the box here so that as people shoot, it wouldn't hook as bad when they're shooting. But if you notice the lines in the topography, the highest point is just before the green, which is 222 feet. It slopes back down to about 218 feet at the edge of the green here, and it's much lower, about 214 feet above sea level at the tee box. So what happens is people can't see the green, and when they do shoot, it tends to roll off at the back end. So by leveling that out, we can move forward. You can see there's a berm at the end. They would like to level off this area by cutting away the front of the green, raising up the back side. You can go one more. This is the actual view from the tee box. You can't see the green, you can just see the pin, so they want to level out, and the next slide shows they want to slide the green from where it is back a little bit to where this green oval is. They'll be raising the back end and the sides and shaping the berms to make sure a little more of a cut to keep the ball from going into the woods. And again, the cart path is up in the top left-hand side, so as people move to the clubhouse, hopefully to utilize the services there, the food and drink, the last thing they see is newly improved green. And going forward, not this year, but in the future, the second hole, which is, it's 90 degrees from the end of the first hole, they wish to move that to the left, to keep away the balls that are going into the backyard, probably where your father's.
I don't know, my daughter likes picking up balls in the backyard.
So, but this is the current proposal, and they feel that they will be able to increase their revenues, and will make a better play and attract more golfers. So,
They've been advertising too in the radio.
Yeah.
They provide that amp stuff that, so yeah, it's, especially things that are closing, it should be.
Yeah.
Okay, the last article is even gonna be quicker because we're seeking no action on Article 24, which was a street acceptance article. We kept a placeholder for Alyssa Way for the second town meeting in a row, and Steve can tell you, it still isn't there yet. Got it? Bring up the date.
Yeah, it's, just following up with their engineer with paperwork and stuff, I still don't have it, so I'm just gonna wait till spring.
Eventually.
At some point.
So again, that's what we have. Obviously, what you have remaining beyond the financial are the zoning articles, the
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 remaining zoning articles. And then you then have the 3 recycling-related articles. And then that sort of wraps it up to get you to 24 total. And so again, with your indulgence, we'll be back next week for the, sort of round out the remaining financials. Like I said, Susan Gates will be here the following week after, but other than that, we should have everything for you, because I know your timetable is tight, given the earliest possible date we can have a fall town meeting is this year, it's the 15th, so. So thank you for your time this evening.
All right, that brings us to discussion on future meetings and timeline for the finance committee warrant book production. And seeing this schedule frightens me. For many reasons, and one of which is we really need the 27th to vote. I don't see how we can vote the 20th.
I don't know that, because we have to have the printed book for October 1st, so if you're voting the 27th, that leaves me, and I do work full-time, so
Well, I
that would
understand.
mean I have
No, I
to
understand.
somehow get the book to the printer, and maybe I could do that and be late on Friday, but that printer generally wants 2 to 3 days to
No, I
print,
know.
and you're giving them 1 day.
Do we have to have the book by the 1st?
Yes,
So,
that's be 2 weeks prior to.
2 weeks prior.
so I can talk to the printer, but in the past,
No, I
they're
know.
not very happy. In the past, they've.
They're never happy.
2 to 3 days. So if I say like, I'm gonna give it the 29th and I want you to have it Monday the 1st, I don't know what to say.
We can't. We don't need to.
I don't know how we're gonna do on the vote on the 20th.
Well, let me ask you something. We're going to discuss potentially scheduling,
So what would-
rescheduling Thursday the 13th.
So that's
for
what,
everybody.
that's,
So why
yeah,
don't we,
so.
could we reschedule the 27th earlier in that week? Would
It's
that,
gonna totally throw things off. It's gonna be tough even for next week. So next week, I'm not here.
I'm not here.
I have my other,
and Vicky's not here.
Vicky's
We
not
have
here. So
town
we have
night.
3 members that we know for sure are not here.
But I could do another night next week.
So,
Yeah, it's a matter of the space availability and the schedule for Chelmsford town meeting and everything like that, which we have to work with. Off the top of your head, Paul, do you know who meets on Wednesday nights?
Wednesday night would be the planning board, that'll be next door though.
Yeah, the next door.
I can look real quick to see who would be on, who else may reserve it, but I don't, we shouldn't have a room problem
Yeah.
next Wednesday. Because we have plenty of meeting space, even if we have to go to the fire training room, we get there. So,
Yeah.
so
And then I have to talk to Lily about the, we probably have camp
it'll
quarterback.
be
next
exactly
week.
like this, because they'll be
Yeah.
doing the planning board meeting.
Planning board meeting, exactly, yeah.
Wednesday works for me.
We may have to do that in order to get this crunch in. We may have to reschedule till Wednesday night.
How does it work for everybody else?
Does that work for everybody else?
That's fine.
Yeah, okay. Let's do that. Now Kathy said that Wednesday worked for her too. I spoke with her, so.
Okay.
So
Pam,
we'll
does that work
just,
for you?
Yeah.
It does?
Yep.
Okay.
so instead of next Thursday, the 13th, we're gonna meet Wednesday,
Yeah.
the 12th.
Paul, is that gonna work for you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Same time, same bat channel?
Same bat time, same bat channel. Well, same bat recorder.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just, especially if we have to get this book done and vote out
Yeah.
on the 20th.
Now, the 20th, I'm not
Of course.
I'll be here.
Because why would everybody be here?
And I won't be here on the 20th, just so you know.
Oh, fantastic. No, it would definitely, we're gonna have to reschedule that last week too.
Can we do the Wednesday to the, like, can we do the,
So you need the oh jeez.
You're saying the 19th instead of the 20th?
this is, you know why? Because we talked to Mr. Lang.
I know,
Both.
every year
both
Thursday
that-
nights,
Thursday
parent
nights
nights are on
with the parents.
Thursday.
Thursday nights.
I know.
It wasn't originally. One of them was gonna be on a Tuesday.
Wednesday the
Thursday.
7th, Wednesday the 19th is gone for her.
I'm okay.
No, jeez. So you're saying you print the final copy for the 25th, which means we need the votes.
We would need to meet like Monday, the 24th. Is that?
That still wouldn't work. I
that
mean,
still wouldn't work.
there's no way I'm gonna crank out the letter
No.
that night. I mean,
So, no,
as it is, it takes me a few hours to write that letter.
so if we move the 20th to the 19th, it just might be a long session. We're just gonna have to get it done,
20th, 19th. So
so that we're all here.
so we're no longer Thursdays or Wednesdays?
Well, just for the next
No.
2 weeks.
just for a fall session.
Just-
Does anyone have a religious issue with that?
Yeah, it's Yom Kippur, but anyway, I don't.
No,
I'm Irish Catholic, so
I don't wanna, like,
I don't have a religious issue.
I
Do you have a
I
religious
don't
issue?
personally, no.
No, I do not.
Not to put anybody in the spot.
No,
Yeah.
but I don't wanna do it if anyone does, we'll just
And
find
of
another
course,
day.
of course. I mean, that is the highest of holy days.
because it's being recorded, right? So
It's
it's
being re-
not
yeah, it's
like
being
live
recorded.
or
Right.
anything like that.
We're not gonna be live the rest of our sessions, if that's the case, yeah.
If you don't wanna do it on Yom Kippur,
We could do it Tuesday.
we could do it Tuesday.
Well, it begins Yom Kippur begins the evening of Tuesday.
Yeah, it's a Rev Yom Kippur.
Yeah. It always starts, yeah, thank you. It always starts the night before, yeah, it's on that. Let's hold off on rescheduling the 20th for now, until next week, and we see how many people are available. I'd hate to not have us all here for a vote, but that's happened in the past.
Is
So
it just me that can't make
it might be
it?
just you, Anita, if that's the case. I mean, I'm sorry, but
What are you
we
gonna
already
do,
have
FaceTime with you?
we already have
With the parents,
Oh.
we already have students.
High school.
Yeah. Well, how long does that go?
goes to 8:30.
Okay, so come here after.
Okay.
Yeah,
We'll
we
have a
won't be
presentation.
voting, we won't be
We
voting.
won't be voting until then.
Until then,
Yeah,
yeah.
And quite frankly, if you're over 8:30, you come directly here. It's not ideal, but it's possible. Because we already, on the 20th, have Susan Gates coming in to give her presentation for the CCA. We may have other people we have to have that day, so there's no way we're gonna fit all the planning board next week, all the zoning articles, and 3 citizen petition
No,
articles.
no.
This is not, we can't do it, we'll be here until the next day.
So if we split those up over those 2 days, we won't start voting until at least 9:30. 9:30,
Potentially,
yeah.
All right, I will be here then.
20th may be a long day.
We'll keep
We've
your
had
seat
those
warm
before.
for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Although Paul will not be here.
That's okay, but you really won't need me at that
We
point.
really won't need you at that point, usually we don't have questions at that point, so
But I'll likely, yeah, I guess.
that would be great, yeah.
Yeah.
Guess what, John? Okay, so let's hold off, let's say the 20th is going to go forward. We do have, I wouldn't like that to be live broadcast because it's our vote night,
Yeah.
Okay.
and we already have that secured. So,
Okay.
so we'll move next week to the 13th.
12.
I'm sorry, the 12th, I apologize. No, like I said, my other board infant wisdom scheduled a meeting that night, even though I told them Thursdays in the fall, can't do. So,
Do we have to vote on the change in schedule? I don't think so.
I don't so, speaking of those two meetings, the 12th and the 20th, as I mentioned, we have CCA coming on the 20th. So then we have the fire station consolidation and service study, the open space stewards. For the municipal ambulance service and fire station consolidation, Glenn, I know that's the board's article. Are you yourself discussing and presenting it, or is there someone that's presenting it? Okay.
I'm just gonna talk briefly during the open session, just to give you a heads up.
Okay, perfect. So we can talk about when you can, you come up during public comment. We can talk about that. But let's plan on one of those 2 nights having a brief presentation on that. Seeing as you'll be voting on it on Monday night, or discussing on Monday night, and then let's reach out to Phil and see which of the 2 dates works best for him for the open space stewards. So planning board's meeting next week at the same time.
So they'd have to come on the 20th.
That happened on the 20th. And those are 5 articles?
1, 2, 3, yes.
A couple of them are pretty straightforward, from what I've read and seen, at least I think they will be. And there are minor changes to the dwelling definition, just as there were last go around. A brief explanation of the removal of those parcels in Mill Road. So, I mean, they should be able to power through that pretty quickly, I think. At least for questions that we might have for that, unless somebody else has another idea. But so the 20th, I think is that. So really, I think we should try to get Phil in next week, on the 12th if possible. And then, do we have, I know that there are 3 citizens, this was a recycling committee for the first, the checkout bags, general bylaw amendment. And then for the 2 citizen petitions, there are 2 separate citizens for each. I personally don't have their contact information. Does anybody else? I mean, they are. I'll tell you right now. Sorry. All right. So 22 is the styrene containers that was being proposed by Cynthia. I don't want to mispronounce her last name. Is it Fikers? So if anybody has some contact information for her, I don't know if you might.
I think I've got.
Paul, do you have, because it's on the petition.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have the same question for you for Nicole.
Yeah.
If you could just forward that contact information to me, and I'll reach out to them tomorrow or the next, and see if they're available next week to come in and give a short presentation on what they're proposing.
Are we gonna try and get the recycling people in on the 12th too?
I think we should,
Yeah.
if at all possible, just so we can, again, get through those. And maybe by the time we get through those, planning board will be done, and they can come next door and talk to us after.
Hi there.
Hello.
Yeah, that might not be a bad idea.
Hey, who knows?
You never know.
Okay, so it looks like we may vote the 20th.
We're gonna have to.
We're gonna have to.
Bring caffeine.
This is ridiculous. This is a tight schedule.
Mhm.
And we're starting at Thursday earlier than we did last year.
But I was gonna say, Jim, when is it ever not?
A tight schedule, that's very true.
This past year.
I don't know. I think if we're always sort of,
No, remember this past year we had the
That's
late.
why we had 2 meetings, that was it. And
Yeah.
the second meeting. in
We
May.
did. We powered through in the second meeting.
yeah, we were here till like
Yeah,
11.
yeah.
I mean, if you have to
Right.
meet the 27th, I think they have some printed on
I know.
the first, but not all of them.
We're not gonna do that. We're gonna meet the 20th. The other thing we have to fit in on one of these dates is the tax classification committee.
That's right. I forgot about that.
They were asking for next Thursday, however, we won't be here next Thursday.
No,
So
but can they come next?
they might be able to come next
Wednesday?
Wednesday. Let's see if it'd be Mike, Brittany, and it would be Sheila Bichette will be coming, because Sheila is our liaison. And she would answer questions about the presentation that they gave at the public input session. And if you haven't had a chance to watch it, please go back and take a look at it. And take a look at the presentation that they sent to us. So we can get understanding and an idea. And I know, Rena, you went and presented with them. So if we can kind of have an idea of where we stand, because what Sheila's looking for is a little bit of input. She ultimately will be making their decision. And as of this afternoon, hearing from Mike and from Sheila, they expect by the 11th, which is next week, to have an idea of how they're going to address the recommendations. They weren't quite sure how they were going to approach the votes or recommendations they were going to make, but they're going to go piece by piece, item by item, or not. And I think that they'll be able to consolidate how they're going to do it on the 11th, so that they can come to us and say, this is how we're going to do it, and Sheila can say, this is how I see it, and this is why I see it this way, and do you have any questions or input regarding that?
Right.
Because, again, she is our liaison.
Right.
So, yeah, we'll see if they can come on the 12th and on the 13th. So that fills up, if everybody's able to make it on that fills up our next week.
Are we missing anybody?
No, I don't think so.
Well, I mean, Paul's gonna have to come back on the 12th, depending on what additional information comes in for the.
From Monday, so
Right.
that'll come
For
Monday.
money?
For money and for Monday. So that'll happen Monday, and then he'll come back on that Wednesday. Uh-oh, he's making faces. Okay. Okay, we're good.
No, I'll be here. We'll be doing that arbitration hearing that day, so.
Oh, great, it'll be a fun cap to your day.
I just don't know, and it only involves 7 sergeants. I just don't know what I can turn the numbers around.
And it's in Boston too, isn't it?
Right, no, it's here.
Oh, it's here. Oh, okay, it's here. Okay.
There you go, yeah. Hopefully it'll settle. We'll have to do it.
All right, so that kind of gives us the timeline. So if we vote on the 20th, looking on this timeline here, you need, well, you can't really email copies of the book to us for review until after the 20th. You have the 19th being the date that the chairman's letters due and the copy of the books being, and that ain't gonna happen. That we'd have to vote next week, and that's not even feasible. So I think we're looking at really the 24th to have everything kind of finalized. And in between, vote on the 20th, get things circulated, and really get things finalized around the 24th so that you can print it off on the 25th. No, this is tighter than last year, for sure. I don't know, we'll get it done. But yeah, the 20th is not, if we go the 20th, obviously we won't be able to circulate until at least the 21st. The very least. I know it takes a couple of days to get that stuff in. I know you can start getting stuff together, but really.
Yes. I can just plug in
You can plug in.
the recommendations.
Yeah. Okay. All right, good. So that gives us the next to discuss reorganization of the committee. So this is kind of moved to this point of the year from where it used to happen, which was around December. We would have a kind of follow-up meeting after the kickoff to the new year and after the fall town meeting. When Tom passed away, we kind of had to have a meeting and change the organization back in September, beginning of September. Kathy wanted to be able to vote if we did vote, and she's not here this evening. So that's why I put discuss as opposed to an actual reorganization tonight. What we want to do, the timeline is fine. We can certainly vote next week if everyone wants to vote next week. Or if we want to put it off to December again, we can certainly do that. I'm fine with doing that. And that way, especially with the crunch time, I can get I'll work on the book, and then we can have a vote after. Or if you want to just vote next week, we can certainly do that too. It's at the board's discretion how you guys want to do it.
Well, I mean, next week seems to be the only day that we're all gonna be here.
Yes, correct.
So then I think if we're gonna vote before December, then we should.
That next week would be the week if we're going to vote before December.
Or move it to December and do it after where it's on the original schedule.
Why was the original schedule in December? Was there a reason for it, or was it just sort of the?
It was for continuity, because if it happens during the fall period, and there's a change
Right,
in the leadership, whatever it may be, then there's a new person stepping in the middle of the process.
right,
And that's why it happened in December, so it'd be two full town meeting periods,
right.
and then before you ramp up for a very long period of budget preparation,
Right,
so you
Right,
had to
no,
change
that
in
makes
December,
sense.
which made sense, but we changed it to September, and it worked the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It's just, with the time crunch, it may not, but I'm fine doing it next week, that's fine.
Does this reorganization, we're just talking chair, vice
Chair,
chair?
vice
chair, vice
that's
chair,
it, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's a fancy way of saying.
It's a fancy way of
I'm like,
saying
what
it.
are we doing?
Like-
No.
We're gonna switch seats, okay, everybody get up.
I think we should do it, we should move it to December, just because if we change the chair, then they're stuck writing the letter.
So let's do next week.
So- That's a valid point.
Right, like, and it's gonna be that
And there was a
every year.
reason, and there's a reason it was always done. We were, due to unforeseen horrible circumstances, we were forced to push it forward. I say we put it back to December. It's one less thing we have to do this week.
Yeah, that's true.
And Vicky's new, it'll give her a little time to get to know everybody
Okay.
and the process.
Again, that's fine. Either way, either one's fine with me. It's up to the boards.
I have no preference.
Okay.
I have no preference.
Okay. So let's bump it up to December.
December.
Let's do it that way.
Sounds good.
And that way we clean it up again and we're back to the original schedule we used to have.
Yeah.
Okay. That works. Okay, old business. Is there anything lingering from last year?
I can't remember last week.
I can't remember this morning. So long as- yeah.
All right, new business. Tax classification. So as I mentioned, with the scheduling, they'll be coming in hopefully next week. We can have that discussion. That's really all the new business that we have. That I'm aware of. Anybody else have any new business they can think of? Town-related items.
On the tax classification, so they're hoping to have a plan, you said, next week. What's the timing of who's voting, when?
Okay, so based upon my discussions and during the meetings and my discussions with Mike and Sheila, they are looking to have, on the 11th at their meeting, they're looking to have a plan as to how they're going to couch and craft their recommendations to the Board of Selectmen. They need to present at the first meeting, I believe, in October, to the Board of Selectmen, their recommendations. And so that it's prior to town meeting and there's time, and we believe in, is it November or December, one of the two?
Early December.
Early December, although they've got a bunch of holidays coming in between that, where the actual vote by the Board of Selectmen will be made. So they'll hear the vote recommendation from the tax classification committee, and then they'll make their decision based upon both presentation by them and also presentation by the Board of Assessors as they're required to do every year.
What's our role in this?
Our role, we have a liaison, and our liaison, Sheila Bichette, who was a former chairman of our committee for a couple of years, served on the FinCom. And so she has had an active position on that committee and has participated in all the discussions. And she's going to report back to us on what she's seen, what she feels, and how she would like to interpret things and ask for our input, if at all, if any.
So it's advisory.
It's an advisory position, yeah, no, we are not making a recommendation, but we're listening to her position and maybe asking some questions and making some of our own recommendations based upon her discussion with us and Mike's discussion with us.
Eric and I attended the last meeting that they had.
Good. So I watched that, so, it was informative, and I believe I circulated today, or yesterday when they signed the meeting, the slide presentation that they had at that meeting.
Right.
And then actually just before this meeting, they sent me a whole bunch of more stuff, which I'll circulate tomorrow. So there's a lot more information that they've been working with that they've had at their disposal that they have now shared with us to take a look at prior to them coming in. so that we have a better, maybe a better understanding of where they are and where Sheila specifically is coming from and in her thought process, whether it's a residential exemption or a commercial, small commercial exemption, or there's a split rate where there's no split rate. So, I think those are the four main points. So we'll have that potentially next week. I think their desire is to have it mid-September so that they're ready to make their recommendations the week after and can present a full report to the selectmen 1st of October or whatever date that is. And then they were planning on Thursday and hoping that they're available Wednesday. Public comment.
Glenn Diggs, 220 Wellman Ave, also member of the Board of Selectmen. First of all, concerning the board, the planning board, don't count the chicken on being too short. It's getting a lot of
It's getting a lot of flag, yeah.
I just want to talk about the money we would like to see the arts receive. It's kind of out of the box, we understand that. And thought we should share some of our thoughts so that when you're talking to her, you can formulate some ideas about it. The idea is that, as you know, the Board of Selectmen has initiated a policy direction, and that is economic development for Chelmsford is a good thing, and that we should strive in every way to increase our economic development. The Center for the Arts is part of the image that Chelmsford sells to the world. If you look at towns around us, they don't have a Center for the Arts. The Center for the Arts is located in the center of Chelmsford, and around it you'd have a lot of very nice restaurants. Amos, 110 Grill, Fish Restaurant, the New Mexican Restaurant. All of these are theoretically facilities that could cater to people who take in the arts. In that if there's eventually a tie-in, it creates an economic engine. We get money from all the restaurant business that they do. If they do more restaurant business, it enables us to do more. The Center for the Arts we're all run on their own budget. One of the high costs in that budget is their energy costs, which is about $20,000 a year. If you're running a facility like that and you're having the public in continually, you have to have air conditioning, you have to have it heated properly, and so forth and so on. And the idea is that if we give them some money, in theory, they will be able to take that money and generate more revenue for themselves, which they will use to fund their own efforts, and at the same time create additional need among the restaurants in the area, creating a symbiosis between all of them, and differentiating us from the Bell Records and the Westfords and all of that, because we are a town that also addresses the arts in addition to having a great school system and a lot of other things. When companies are looking to relocate in the area, one of the things that they may look at is the kind of non-business things that the town has, and this is one of them. So the idea is that the stronger they get, the stronger the town gets. It's all part of the economic development of the town, selling the town to the public. And that's why we are looking to provide them with some additional funds to hire, maybe have a professional person who works among all the volunteers. Maybe I know that she has some ideas about having a technical director, which requires some skills. And the idea is to make more money ultimately for the town and create a feeling that the town is better than other towns because of it. So that was the idea behind this. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Hearing none. Any press questions? There is no press. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
See you guys next
Wednesday. I'll make sure I change it in my calendar.
Yeah, don't forget.
know what,
forget.
I'm gonna do it right
Please
now.
don't forget. If we don't have a quorum next Wednesday, it'll be really bad.
No, because you'll be calling me at like 7:45.